you everyone for joining us today for our last presentation of this year of the SBC. Today joining us from ICF is one of our senior capture directors, Dan Roche. Dan is here to talk to us about starting smarter, using AI to save time, work faster, and unleash your own creativity as humans. Really going beyond just reading RFPs or parsing RFPs with AI. Here to give a wholehearted endorsement to what Dan is talking about. Dan is here today truly and honestly after helping me overcome a lot of my own challenges getting AI working as part of my own personal workflow and really putting me in a position where I was better understanding how to interact with AI. And he's going to talk to all of us about that today. So Dan, I will let you take it away and I will be back for questions at the end.
Great. Liz, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone at AFCEA for having me today to speak. I appreciate your time. Again, my name is Dan Roche, but what I first want to get into regarding the next half hour or so is what I will not be talking about. There's a lot of content there about AI that I think we're all used to. I will not be talking at length about how awesome AI is. I'm sure we've all seen the various TED Talks and videos that give us this big hyped up vision of what AI is. I think it is great, but I'm not going to dwell on making this a big puff piece about the coolness that is AI. I figure that's been done. I'm not going to give a live demo of anything. This is going to be a very pointed philosophical conversation about AI and how to think about it as a technology. And I'm also not going to pitch anything here. I'm not here to speak on behalf of a tool or a new app or a offering or a gadget. That is not my function. My only purpose here today over the next half hour is to try to convey a universal way in which people can think about and understand what AI is and is not that helps them get started on their journey. My goal is to create a world of informed, confident, capable AI operators that can use it to drive more efficiency, better outputs, better outcomes for their clients, better growth, etc. That's the main focus I have here. So it'll be largely a narrative with some thought pieces in the middle, things we can talk about and think about, but just kind of give you a sense of what to expect. Now, who am I? Liz gave me an introduction before. My name is Dan Roche. I'm a senior capture director here at ICF. Where I've been lucky enough to be part of the whole BD life cycle from soup to nuts regarding finding opportunities, working to capture and procure them, but also winning proposals. And before I was here, I was a vice president overseeing the federal civilian portfolio at Publicis Sapient. And one thing I did in the middle of those two escapades, which I will now plug, is I wrote a book. I wrote a book which is a beginner's guide to doing business in our industry, working with the government contracting, and I will plug it now, and it's available wherever you get your books, as long as that place is Amazon. Moving on, over the next half hour, I'm going to talk at a very high level about AI, what it is and is not, again, and I'm going to give you some actionable ways of thinking about it that'll make it easy to get going within AI. With any new technology, it can be very intimidating. It can be very confusing. My goal here is to break down and deconstruct the topic in a way that helps you get started on your own journey. I'm going to open up with a thought exercise that I've actually brought up for years, and it's very applicable to any new technology. And I'm going to ask people to bear with me for a second and imagine you meet an alien, or you meet someone who has been raised in a cave. Anyway, someone who has no exposure to our modern culture. And you explain to them the concept of baseball. You show them the rules of baseball by Doubleday. You show them all the various baseball diamonds we have in the US and beyond. You explain to them the whole sport of baseball so they get the rules, how it's played. Then you say that there was some time ago someone who played baseball for almost 20 years. They were injured all the time. They missed almost their entire first year in the league. And over their almost 20-year career, they struck out over 70% of the time. They might assume from what they know that this person is not very good at baseball, but this person exists, and their name is Mickey Mantle, one of the best sluggers of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, period. And the story there is that context matters. You can be great at something and still fail quite often. And part of our understanding of baseball and of Mickey Mantle is that we know how hard baseball is. We adjust and calibrate how we consider our baseball players as such, and we judge them on the right bar. There's actually something which we talk about a lot in sports called the Mendoza line regarding the very notional idea of what a decent hitting percentage might be based upon Carlos Mendoza in the 70s, and that was thought to be roughly 215. So you can strike out about 80% of the time and be considered a good baseball player in terms of offensive production. That's how hard baseball is. But that one line took decades to form in terms of our understanding of what baseball is and how hard it is. I think right now we are still forming our Mendoza line of all things AI. We don't know how much to expect from it, whether it's too little, too much. And I think a big part of knowing what AI is and using it to its best effect is to get a sense of the proper, what we should expect from AI and how to lean on it and actually how it needs, or when and how and when it needs more help from our side. So it's important to be realistic. And part of my goal today is to get us in that zone. Now, in terms of what AI is and what it's not, I'm going to show you one example you may have already seen here online. If you look at the right-hand side of this slide, this is a screen cap of a newspaper in Chicago that came out early in May last month. And this is the Chicago Sun-Times summer reading list for this summer. It's a feature that's been a part of that paper's history for generations even. And you'll read there a bunch of very compelling, very interesting book reviews that people have been told they should go out and consider bringing to the beach, wherever they're going to be this summer, and pour through them. If you read through it, it's a fun list. A lot of cool books are there. It makes you want to go ahead and read. And what happened is, you may already know what happened, but this was published, it hit the newsstands, and a day and a half later, people realized something about this list. Roughly half of these books don't exist. They were made up. The first few do. Those are actual books. They're bestsellers. As you go down the list, you'll see real authors tied up to books they never actually wrote. You'll see towards the end, fake books made from nothing applied to either real or fake authors. This thing is largely imaginary. And it quickly came out that an editor for the Sun-Times was using ChatGPT as an assistant, leaned too heavily upon it, and then this list went out to press. They were, of course, fired, and this was used widely as an example of AI's failure. I'm going to submit one thing for consideration. I don't think this is an AI failure. Some editor in Chicago had 5 minutes and had their computer, their laptop, give them this list of mostly real books. Given 5 minutes of time, that's pretty impressive. I'll get into why and how it made things up. But the bottom line I want to take from this is, whenever you use AI as an operator, as an assistant, you are accountable for its outputs. No matter how much lifting it does, it is ultimately your name on the work product. And it's important to understand that and also know what you're doing. A plane is a wonderful invention as long as you know how to fly it. Otherwise, it won't get you very far. And a key part of knowing AI is focusing in that time to be a responsible AI operator. Not to get scared or spooked, but to know what you're doing. And part of this conversation is that goal. Now, I'm going to go back a bit and talk at a very high level regarding how computers think and how they work on information. And I'm not going to get into all the nooks and crannies about how AI operates, but it's important to know at a very high level the whole practice and how it works. Now, all of you, I'm assuming, have spent years using Google, and before that, Yahoo, Lycos, whatever it is. Keyword search is what it sounds like. And that is basically the killer app of the information age. It's been around for decades. But the idea of keyword search is very, very simple. I have a word, I have a phrase, I have a name. It's a sequence of characters. And a computer or Google can very quickly look to see how often that phrase pops up in a collection of documents or repositories, and it can show you where it found it. So in Google, if I want to look up, say, someone's name or a quote, it can scan through very quickly, find the name where it shows up, and say, hey, here's where I found it. That's the results. Keyword search is basically, again, the story of the information age. It's machines doing things very, very quickly to help us look up information as if we were in a library. That's the big killer app there. But the one thing I want to say about that, it's not a criticism, humans don't think that way. We, as a species, aren't good at memorization. I'm going to ask you now to consider one more thought exercise. Let's say, picture your favorite poem, favorite short story. And let's say you are reading it out to a classroom. It could be children, adults, whatever else, people paying attention to what you're saying. They are intent, they're focused on you. You read them the poem, you give them the whole list of whatever it's on the written page before you. You then ask them to say, recount the story for you after hearing it once. Maybe it's Robert Frost, maybe it's Ray Bradbury, who cares? If they've been paying attention, people can then recount what you were talking about. They'll remember characters, plot lines, messages, main events, stories. But if you ask them after that to say, okay, repeat back the story word for word as if memorized, they will not be unable to help you. Because we as humans, we ingest information differently than simply memorizing it. If I tell you a story, you will, behind the scenes of your brain, take what I tell you, decompose it, break it into various ideas and objects of people, concepts, relationships, and store it that way. Whenever we've had to memorize things for school, as you may know from your own experience, that's a whole different ballgame. To memorize Gettysburg Address takes a lot more time. It's a lot harder. It's a lot more intense because our brains, by default, use shortcuts. We break things down into subject parts. Moreover, one thing we also do is we are very good at grouping similar things and finding shortcuts. If I tell you a poem about, say, a pony, and I mention the word pony again and again and again, if I ask you to recount the story again for me later on, you might say horse. If I say automobile, you'll say car. When we break things down for our own use, we tend to group things in similar sets of equals, and we will access them that way, not in terms of a keyword, in terms of an actual concept. Our brain stores information that way. And what AI does is take that series of shortcuts and it puts it into computer language. It shows computers how to think in that same very human way. It ingests information, breaks it down, and recomposites it in that very same way in ways that enable it to do much larger scales of processing than, say, if it were just looking for a keyword among 1,000 documents. That's what AI is at its core. It's a lot more than that, honestly, but in terms of how we're having this conversation, that's the main way that AI breaks things down. So what that is, what I mentioned before, that's called inference. That's called creating an equivalency or an association based not on two keywords matching up, but on two things being in the same set of A resulting in B. That level of connection is what makes AI special, but also what makes it at some levels somewhat inconsistent that I want to get into. Now, the next thing I want to do, one more thought experiment, I want to ask people, let's say we had a machine and we wanted to figure out, we had the whole list of lyrics of all the songs ever written on a big hard drive, and you want to ask, okay, give me a list of all the love songs ever written. How would we go about this? If we're thinking in terms of keyword searching, we might say, okay, looking throughout lyrics, which songs use the word love? That's the first step. Second step, you might say, okay, the more times a song mentions the word love, rack them and stack them that way. So if a song mentions love a lot of times, that's certainly a love song. Less times, it could still be less song, less so. No times, forget about it. It isn't worth our time. That's a reasonable way of thinking of it in terms of the keyword search paradigm. I'm going to give you one example now. What you're seeing in front of you is lyrics to a song written by Elton John and Bernie Taupin called Your Song. If you read it out, you can probably hear it in your head right now. That is a very famous love song. It's been at weddings. It's been on TV shows and movies. That is, we can probably all agree, a love song. The word love appears 0 times on that lyric sheet. So the question is, why do we consider it a love song? Now, each of us have in our brains a categorization of what we determine a love song to be, how we categorize it, how we store it. So in our brains, in our internal machine learning brains, we have determined that this song, for whatever reason, is a love song, which I agree it is. It probably isn't a very controversial opinion. Again, not for lack of a keyword, but because of where it's been heard, in terms of what it's talking about, in terms of the actual subject matter, etc. Things which define it beyond that one semantical presence of a word or not. Now, there is some judgment there in terms of our decision that this is in fact a love song. Let me give you one more example. Last night, of course, I was playing Spotify and I was remembering Brian Wilson, who passed recently. And this song began playing, and it's She's Real Fine, My 409. It's a song which he wrote of devotion to his car. 409 is a stock racing car. This song is an ode to Brian Wilson's car. And the question is this a love song? I say yes. Others may say no. To me, it is. Others might say it's creepy. That's a car. That's subjective. But we all have different categorizations of how this is in fact sorted. And even though the word love never appears, even though the actual object is a vehicle, I might say, yeah, sure it is. Now, remember, we didn't ask before what a love song meant. We didn't define it. We didn't offer other clauses. We didn't say it was two people. We just said love song. And to me, yeah, it is. You might say otherwise. But this is an example of how that one decision comes into our categorization of things. And this level of decision making, this arbitrary, somewhat subjective measure is the catch of AI. That also is a reason why, no matter how much more AI develops, there will always be a level of uncertainty because it rests on the idea of making inferences through judgment. AI makes calls. It decides on its own how things associate with one another, which groups they fall into, and it then gives you results based on those inferences. It goes beyond A equals B. It decides how things match up. A lot of ways it does this are extremely helpful and are why it's powerful. So, for example, most people here know what agile development is. It's in all we do. If you're developed in IT, it's our bread and butter. If I want to look through, say, a company's past performance corpus and figure out, okay, what engagements have we done agile development on? Again, I can look for the word agile. It'll give me those results when it shows up. But maybe a team or a contract said, we use DevSecOps. We use SAFE. Now, we know those things mean agile. If you're doing DevSecOps, that's going to include agile. SAFE, it's the A in that acronym. But again, unless you call it all out in a keyword search, that might not show up. AI can make the inferences. It will know off the bat, SAFE means agile. XP, extreme programming, if you're old school, that means agile. It can infer those things and give you better results than, say, a basic keyword search might be. It will look for formations and not keywords. If I want to ask which NFL teams use the West Coast offense, I can look for the words West Coast offense somewhere in their playbook, or I can say, okay, what teams have a 5-back set and first down? Okay, if that team does, that's West Coast offense, go. It'll find patterns. That's actually how it learns and how it infers things. But here's the thing. As talking about, say, Brian Wilson in his car, it involves making guesses. It involves making decisions, that whole game of inference. And this is why, with all things AI, you have to validate the inferences it makes, and you have to steer it as best you can. Because if you don't, it'll steer itself. To go back to the last example we had here of the reading list, again, I would submit this is not a failure of AI. An editor had 5 minutes. They wanted a full page of book reviews. And AI got going and found some books on top of the heap. And then at some point in time, okay, goodbye. And at some point in time, it decided that it wanted to make people happy by filling in the rest of the page with good recommendations. Some of these books, for example, like say The Rainmakers, bottom top right, Percival Everett, it's a real author, it's a real book. Now, Percival Everett could have written The Rainmakers, but did not. But you know what? AI said, this is the kind of book they had to write. Sure, put them together, make them happy, make it a good reading list. It fills things out because no one ever told it, validate each of these books. They must be real. They must exist. The name and the book must both be real and credible and current. Obviously, no one gave it that direction. And as such, it made assumptions, it made inferences, and it was off. And ultimately, the one thing to understand about the whole inference game is AI, being a robot, tries hard to impress you and make you happy, and it prioritizes that over accuracy. It'll use inferences, but it wants to make you happy. You have to draw your parameters very, very tightly. And there are times, it happens all the time, when it'll make inferences you did not intend to be acceptable. So thinking about AI, at a very high level, it's like a smart but very inexperienced intern. It works very hard. It's very, very smart. It can be too eager to please. A big part of the game will be to help steer it appropriately. And again, I will say it one more time. You are accountable for AI's output no matter what happens. Now, I've given you kind of at this point in time a lot of reason to be afraid of AI. But I guess the question here is we know why AI is different than keyword search. We know how we can use the power of computing and make a lot of very good decisions up front. However, we've established that it will make mistakes, and if the need be, it'll actually make up books. So before we had the Mendoza line of basically how good we were supposed to ask a batter to be in baseball. And the question might be, what should we expect AI to do and not do? Where is that proper line? How much can we trust AI before we have to worry about it making up fake books? And I actually have an offering, which I want to submit for our approval here, is what I use in my work is the 80-20 rule in terms of using AI. In terms of most everyday things that you do in life, this may vary, but by and large, AI can get you 80% of the way in most tasks. It can decompose tasks. It can do research. It can give you ideas. It can create first drafts of, say, proposals or responses, et cetera, very, very, very quickly. It can take raw material and raw ingredients of information and decompose them and analyze them at a speed that's impossible by the human mind and our capabilities there. However, the most important thing here is whatever it does, it'll only get you 4/5 of the way there at best. It is on you to review, edit, refine, and you have to be aware of the things it'll often do left to its own devices to make sure you are not being given made up books. The Chicago reading list there, it reads very, very well. It's very compelling. Unless the editor thought to question the outputs of what it was being given, I can understand why they go to press with that reading list. Being able to know how it thinks and also how to judge what it gives you is a key part of the process of learning how to use AI responsibly and effectively. In terms of what this means, in terms of all things business development and capture and proposal and all growth, I would actually say, I'm going to be a bit of a contrarian here. AI is often touted as a writing tool, which it can do. I would say don't think of it primarily as a tool for writing, though I will say shortly that you actually should use it for writing. Don't think of it primarily as a tool for writing. Think of it as an assistant for research, decomposition, review, finding patterns, looking for information among a sea of documents in ways it would take you too long to do, doing things at scale that perhaps your time could be best spent saved for other more human tasks. I spoke with a government CEO a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about recently over the last year and a half, whenever they submit an RFI to industry, they get roughly 3 to 4 times more responses than they used to get. They're getting overloaded with RFI responses, and they think that the culprit is AI. And I will say, right on. For something like an RFI response, which can be, depending upon the nature of the response, a somewhat effort-intensive endeavor with somewhat questionable, if limited, return on your time, that is a prime candidate for AI. If you're being asked to filter what you do as a company through several specific questions or a very narrow aperture, that is the perfect application for AI and how to make that process of our RFI response quicker and more effective, thus allowing you to respond to more RFIs. You get no points for choosing the hard way. And honestly, I will say right now, categorically, if you aren't using AI for your RFIs, you should be. That is the proverbial low-hanging fruit. But in general, across the board, with all that you do, your most important resource as a small business is your time. It's the hours of your expertise and those of your team and what you have to offer. And every time you can make something more efficient or do something in less time, that gives you time to use and invest elsewhere on other investments, other endeavors, or time with your family, if that's what you're into. AI's gift at a top level, I want to focus on this, is the time it gives you back. It is a force multiplier of human effort. And thinking about it in that way is going to really help you, of course, find out where it can be used, but also really tap it for all it's worth. The way I think about AI, which I'm very much a fan of, think about it as a tool to lighten your personal load and free up your time for more quintessentially human endeavors, things that could not be done by a machine, things that require creativity, ingenuity, or that creative spark that we have yet to and perhaps never will empower a computer to do. In terms of one thing, I'm going to break down even deeper into how I've personally applied AI in terms of all things growth. Is many of you here grew up like I did, I'm sure, on the Shipley's Guide to Proposal Management. We know it up and down, back and forth. And there is a general rule of thumb with all things Shipley's and proposal development is you want to write content early. That is the proverbial eating your vegetables of business development. Write content early, get your homework done ahead of time. That is what responsible teams do. I'm going to say right now, because of AI, I'm going to invert that advice completely. I'm going to say that a modern AI-enabled BD and growth engine should in fact delay writing as long as humanly possible, whenever they possibly can. Put it off, postpone it. Why? Because delaying writing helps you spend more time as a team brainstorming and thinking high level in terms of proof points, win themes, differentiators. It helps you think at a high composite level of how your business can actually position for growth in ways that are somewhat harder and more shut off once you're in a draft review stage. Several years ago, when I was a struggling visual designer, a mentor of mine who was brilliant taught me the stained glass window problem, which has borne more fruit in my career than I can even think about. And if you want a client or a team to give you feedback on something, to help you iterate on it, to react to it, to make it better, if they are given something to review that looks too finished, too polished, too complete, the human brain will pull the punch in terms of its feedback. If I see something which perhaps took my friends and colleagues weeks to put together, and I have to give them feedback, I might soft pedal it. If I'm looking at a 5-page proposal volume which someone spent a lot of time on, and I think this is terrible, we have to scrap it and begin from scratch, that's hard for me to say, because that means I have to realize a great sunk cost on behalf of my colleague and by association my team. But also, there's a lot of pressure in editing a stained glass window. What I was taught back in my early days, if you want people to review something and add to it, deliberately make it look interim, make it look rough. Break it down to black and white. Leave pencil marks. Leave tapes and edit marks and cuts and pock marks. Make it look incremental. That sends a signal to reviewers that it's okay to contribute, to chop away, to edit. And having AI to let us postpone the process of actual composition lets us keep things in that all-important golden zone of storyboards, of bullet points, of concepts, of ideas longer and for a wider audience. I would say even here, the more you can spend time encouraging people to contribute, it also avoids the issue of the sunk cost fallacy when perhaps people are afraid to, again, redo entire sections or rethink strategies. There have been moments over the last few months here in my capacity as a proposal manager where, without saying too much, we had a proposal we submitted about 2 months ago, and within 18 hours of submitting the proposal, we decided to scrap our entire corporate experience section because they weren't the right resonance. They weren't truly the relevant stories. We began anew. This was possible because we had AI to help in that composition. If it was us having to open up binders and pour through materials, we may not have had the boldness to make that hard choice. So being able to use AI to, in fact, keep your work products in a more incremental state for longer allows for that more active and more, in some ways, bold and confident editing process, which will help you drive towards truly high-quality outputs. In terms of getting started here, in terms of all things that basically go is, again, I didn't talk before about tools. And I will say right now, there's a lot of options you have of how to use AI. You have ChatGPT, Copilot, most of you already have through Teams, Claude, Grok, whatever it is. I'm going to say right now that these LLM options bear more in common than they have which differentiate them. Whatever you have available to you, whatever you have at your fingertips, get to know it. They're more similar than they are different. But the one thing I would say as well is as you get into AI, practice, practice, practice. I compare AI to driving stick. I can show you how to do it. I can give you a paper saying where the actual gear shifts go, but there's no surrogate for that level of practice, getting your hands on the steering wheel, getting the feel of the actual operation. You will learn AI by doing less than hearing me talk. And as such, I would say, begin small. Integrate AI into your daily routine. Use it to draft content. Look at emails up front if that's your game. Review your references of, or say, past performances, which you might have within your company's dossier of materials. Use it to research things for new bids you're looking at. Use it in small order to get a feel for the technology, and you will find yourself over time getting more and more ambitious, but also you'll feel yourself feeling out the limitations of where, in fact, the AI must stop and humanity must begin. Because again, ultimately, the goal isn't to have AI replace you. It never will. As long as machines are going to have to make guesses as to what a love song is, there will be that level of judgment and engineering required of us as humans. But I would say at this point in time, as best you can, use it to save your time, to optimize your time, and to help you use more of your brain power in a given day on those quintessentially human things. Knowing how to use it and properly incorporate it in your day will always bear fruit, and it'll over time, as both AI evolves and as you evolve as an operator, will make you more effective and make sure that it gives you more and more of a return from your investments. I've been talking a lot there, and I might pause here a bit for any questions. I know we're a bit over time, which I apologize, but hopefully that was somewhat useful.
I have a question for you.
Please, Liz.
One of the things that we hear a lot, you and I, because we work at the same place, is how careful we need to be with corporate or proprietary information when we interact with AI. And I know we have a lot of discussions internally about what that means, and what tools we can use that are walled for that and what tools we use that aren't walled for that. Do you have any tips and tricks for someone who maybe doesn't have as many guardrails as you and I have?
That is a very good question in terms of responsible AI. And the truth of the matter is, depending upon the tools you use, it's worth understanding where your information goes and the assurances you can gather regarding how it's handled. So for example, if I simply open up a customer level chat GPT account, one of the things which you'll actually have to sign up for in return for it being free or inexpensive is whatever you tell that GPT is then used to help train other GPTs. This is obviously an area where you want to make sure you are not sharing information you would not want to be shared publicly. And with all things, it's going to be on you to manage that constraint. There are examples of, say, for example, with ChatGPT, every main platform has different iterations, different, say, charging services you can use, which offer other assurances that either will not train off your data or in some cases will have it enclaved in various areas. So for example, Microsoft Azure will have offerings where they actually maintain or promise that your information could be held within a certain enclave, either within the continental United States or within a certain number of data centers. It'll make certain assurances, but honestly, there's no real easy answer, but it's important to understand with each tool that you use, the information that you give it and your obligations to that information, both as a citizen of your company, but also with your clients, especially, this is very important to understand, is what's actually going to be within the guardrails of your own obligations. So I would say right now, it does depend, but you ought to be aware of that, because if you simply use free ChatGPT out of the box, it's great, it's wonderful. Be aware that whatever you upload to that ChatGPT may in fact be integrated in what others then get in their own searches. So the question is, it's unsatisfying. It depends. You got to do your homework. I'm sorry, there's no way around that.
That's okay. I don't mind homework. All right, Alan, I think you were first. You want to jump in?
Hi, Mr. Roche. My name is Alan Ma, small business owner at ModTech. With the advent of AI, as you said, there's more RFI responses. Do you have any specific use cases how you use AI in order to submit to responses to the government in order not to be disqualified, as they are now checking to see if responses are AI generated? Thank you.
Yeah, that's also a very important thing. You got to be aware of what's there. I'm not going to ever say, here's how you avoid the government's instructions. That's got to be you. I'm never going to say, here's how you cheat the system. Because many RFPs or many RFIs do in fact have that provision. And when the government says you can't use AI, that's what you have to live by. I will say for a lot of other situations where it's allowable or where AI assisted content is in fact permissible, I would say it's a great opportunity to basically take what you have in terms of raw materials, be it corporate experience write-ups, be it website copy, anything about you. It's very easy to use that as a foundational context and then asking the AI to say, use that information to answer 1, 2, or 3 different questions. So for example, if they want to see examples of, say, how your work is applicable to, say, a news story or a new congressional rule, AI is a very good tool for helping understand the nuance of that rule, if it's in fact read the news, but also helping filter a story of one of your pieces of work against the requirements of that law, for example. It can do that level of research in ways that's a bit more accelerated. But to your first point, if the requirement says no AI, that has to be your discretion, your decision on how to adhere to that requirement and not be compliant. And I can't give you any tips or tricks or advise or endorse that you ever try to evade your responsibilities underneath that guidance.
Well, actually, I don't know if it counts as a question, but I am part of Project Cerebellum, and we advocate agile and responsive AI, responsible AI, sorry. And we developed a free tool for the providers of any AI type sources to your customers. It's called the TAMA score. And let me put it here in the link. Come on. There's the main page, but it's free. We don't care to know what your AI is or what you're doing, but it's a crosswalk of the matrices and frameworks that many federal agencies and companies are required to use. And this, you can do a self-assessment of your AI to see how it meets this crosswalk framework crosswalk. And that way, if a customer asks you, is it compliant with this? Is it compliant with this? Is it compliant with this? You can at least say, yes, we've got these 6 controls we're weak on and we're working on it, but it gives you a self-assessment and it's free. So the second link I provided is that. So it may not necessarily answer your question about, what is it good, but if you're offering AI platforms or services, this is a good way for you to go to your customers is, based on this, we can say that we meet 10%, 20%, 99.5% of the matrix, this framework you're interested in. And it's free. The only thing we're keeping score on is, let's say Dan does it and he checks against 3 AI platforms. We don't care what you name it. AI platform 1, test 1, AI platform test 2, Rev 3 or whatever. It's more of a tool for you guys, so that way you guys can give us feedback and say, this is complete crap, or this is really good, but I wish it had bells and whistles over here and stuff like that. So as long as we're on the AI conversation, I figured I'd give this to you guys and say, please use it, please abuse it, and let us know how we can make it better and more useful for the community.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat, Dan. Looks like Teams is teamsing, so that it's not letting people raise their hands.
Okay,
but I can read the yes.
I'm going to see if I can see these questions here.
Sure. Yeah,
Sure,
my question, Dan, is, GSA has recently come out and says, hey, man, don't include our stuff in your LLMs. As part of our doing our homework, we will use certain AI chat GPT tools to try to gather more information about particular topics of interest. But what kind of recommendations do you have? What other steps of homework can we do to kind of get around that GSA snafu, one of many to come, I'm sure? Over.
I think the one thing about when you think about any working with any LLM, you have a couple of bases of information. You have the data which that LLM is trained for, which may or may not include, for example, a GSA. I compare it to, say, Google Maps. When you have some certain areas that always come up fuzzy, there'll always be certain blind spots on an LLM's training that may in fact limit what you can use it for. There's also how often the LLM's training data is updated. Say, for example, a chat GPT, it's 8 times a day. So you can ask it what happened last night, it'll give you the answer. In terms of using GPT as a research tool, in terms of reading things out there are certain applications where the information is limited to 1 or 2 spots, like in GSA, or where it's behind a login screen, like on, say, sam.gov, where you cannot reliably expect it will have done its homework beforehand. If you want to do things like, say, reviewing congressional executive orders or presidential executive orders or new laws, et cetera, things that are on the common books, you can usually rest assured it will know much more about those and can speak of them more authoritatively. But in terms of analyzing data, there are definitely some opportunities and some areas of our business where we have to do that homework, and can then, once we get, say, an opportunity list, for example, we can then use it or upload it independently into our own chat or our own session, and thus analyze from what the GPT is able to access or what the LM is able to access, how it lines up, or how, for example, our context as a business in terms of our experiences, our performances, our references, how they align to the information there. But there definitely are some areas where the actual training data itself cannot absorb GSA's information by default. So we're going to have to, in very small amounts, give it enough to chew on. Over a long enough time horizon, I want to believe in a world where we can assume every LLM will have the up-to-date, comprehensive information about the entire internet. But currently, we're going to have to be aware of our LLM, how often it does its homework, and how we have to feed it information to help supplement what we're asking it to do, if that makes sense. And I'm seeing Tom's question here is, I can't raise hand. But can
Yep.
the government legally tell that you cannot use AI? That is not my jurisdiction. I wish I went to law school, but I did not. That's something that I cannot say yes or no. But obviously, my default position is if the government says you can't do it, I would say you best not do it.
Yeah, as someone who is in the procurement world and as a Fed, they can put restrictions just like send it to us in a Word format, send it us to a PDF and stuff like that. And as many tests as I've done in my life, they will hold it against you.
Yep. And to that point, it is really more of a conversation starter. Dan, I know the
Yes.
answer to this is there's no way to prove it. The
Yeah.
government actually cannot prove that you used AI unless they went and they owned the AI solution and looked at the database and found that you did something there. They can't
Yep.
prove it.
And in terms of the other question I saw there from Liz, are they looking for M dashes? Yes. If you've used AI, which we all should, is you will see that if you tend to improperly steer or edit your outputs, AI has things it loves going back to. And for some reason, AI, all the LLMs, all of them have all decided that M dashes are the stuff.
You know,
They've all
it's
figured out that everyone loves M dashes, and boy,
What's
oh
an
boy.
M dash?
I'm sorry?
What's an M dash? Are you
An M dash
talking?
is that super long dash that's like twice a normal dash.
Okay.
And all the LLMs, here's the one thing about AI. I mentioned before how it learns what to do and how it decomposes. AI can on its own develop its own habits and preferences without a
Yes.
computer, without a human saying what to do. And for some reason, something about the actual model of AI, each of the individual LLMs out there have on their own decided that the M dash is awesome. They've all made the call that beats the comma, it beats the colon, M dash all the way. And usually if you skip that last 20% of your editing process, you will produce a lot of M dashes, friend. And if you want to easily pass the sniff test, you got to be aware that AI will drop M dashes everywhere. I don't know why. Sam Altman doesn't know why. No one knows why. It just happens.
With that said, thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. It was a pleasure as always. I learn a ton every single time I have a conversation with you about anything, but in particular about AI. And I do appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. And thank you everybody for having me on today. It was a great time.
And Tom, I will turn it back to you.
All right, I'll take it over. I want to say my thanks as well, Dan. Great commentary on exactly what I don't think a lot of people talk about, which is kind of the how and why to use it, not so much the tool, go use this tool or go use that tool. So it was a breath of fresh air. Thank you very much for the deep dive into it.